When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. As the radio man said, I'm Matt Lawrence. Mike's with me, and this is episode 97. We're going to entitle this one, Good Developer Habits. Now, as you may have just heard, I have my ringtones on. It's a bit of a medical situation in my family at the moment, so if something rings or dings, I apologize. I have to have all my ringtones on. But if you want to support us, come and check us out, review us on that Apple Podcast. You can also come on the old Patreon. We got there's only a couple of tiers right now, but the $3 one, we'll give you a shout out in each episode, and we will put a link to a website of your choosing in our show notes, and also we shout out the website as well. And the most important one is that we have that Discord server, so come and check us out. Come share this podcast. Come join us in our Discord. It's all great. I'm winging these intros for now because I'm trying to figure out a good transitionary episode from our new recorded intro. So, in any case, Mike, weekly pain point, please, sir, take it away.
All right. Weekly pain point this week is gardening. I, like probably many others during this pandemic, have taken up a little bit of gardening on our balcony, and it's been going really well. But this last couple days, we've been noticing these weird insects on our herbs. These little white tick-looking things, like little white things that are eating them. I think I don't know if they're eating them or not, but don't know what to do about them. Gonna try to
Aphids
fix
or
that.
something?
Maybe, I don't know. Actually, I was gonna ask you, since you're your family gardens a little bit. You have a big backyard. You have a pretty big garden back there.
Yeah, we got quite
What
a
do you
bit of
guys do
vegetables.
against them? Do you use pesticides? Like I'm for whatever. I'm not like an organic farmer here.
So we used to use like you said, we would basically identify the insect or whatever it is, and then just use an appropriate like chemical thing. Like you just go to the store and buy it. But lately, we've been we'll identify, like the season it happens, we identify what it is, get the appropriate chemical thing, but then we look up preventative measures. So there's been a couple of weird ones, and this is years ago, so recalling from memory, we had one where just having eggshells along like the sides of the pot would like get X insect away or keep them away. So then what we would do is during the year, we'd save up eggshells, obviously clean them and just crunch them up, and then we would do the organic preventative measure the next year, seeing if it would work. And then some of our stuff is just fully organic now, in terms of getting rid of them. So start with chemical, go to organic. That's sort of our procedure.
Cool. That's I'll try that. I heard coffee grounds, like fresh coffee grounds.
That's a big one.
Ward them
That's
off.
a really big one. Yep.
So I might try that once I do get rid of them. I don't think it'll actually get rid of them, as far as I understand it. Like I do have to do something proactive for that. But after that, I might just start with coffee grounds, put it around everywhere just to make sure that we don't get any more of them.
And some things too, like this isn't necessarily for plants, but for example, many types of ants don't like dish soap. And so what I've done before is actually just put out like a small line of dish soap and just left it, like either on a paper towel with a bit of water and just leave it, or I've just put it directly on like a tile floor and I've just left it, and then obviously clean it later. But it's almost, in my experience, again, not a crazy bug guy or anything, but in my experience, they won't go near it. I think it's the scent. I think it hurts them too. Like it doesn't kill them, but I think they don't like it on their skin, from what I've read. So it'll actually make them stay away. So stuff like that. I've done stuff like that just to keep ants and stuff out if there's like a problem in like a crack in the wall or something. So
yeah, gardening tips with Matt Lawrence. There we go.
Apparently, yeah. All from like 10 minutes of Googling and then a whole bunch of trying. So
But I mean, that's
I don't know
the
how
best
accurate it
way
is,
you
but-
can do it. Like for someone that has almost zero experience with it on a long-term basis, like I've planted stuff over the years, especially at my grandparents' house, but I never had to maintain it.
Right.
It's best to learn from someone that's actually had to maintain it and done all this crazy stuff already. So
Dead leaves.
good tips.
Have you had those?
What was it?
Dead leaves.
Dead
Keep
leaves,
those
no.
for fertilizer.
Good stuff.
And
Good
they
stuff.
smell fucking horrible, so I don't do that anymore. like so horrible to the point where I'm in the background gagging because I can't take it. That's why
I'm not going to be doing that on a tiny, like not a tiny balcony, but like on a balcony. I'm not going to have dead leaves smelling like death.
it is particularly gross. So, yeah. I guess my weekly pain point is hospital stuff. I've been dealing with some family stuff. Nothing too severe, but do have a family member hospitalized at the moment, so just dealing with their affairs until they get back. As such as my ringer is on, like I said. But this is a Mike-heavy episode, so I'm going to let him sort of take it away, and then I did up the web news, and take it away, sir.
All right. So good developer habits. Let's talk about them. So yeah, I just want to kind of go over a few of the things that have worked for me. And Matt can chime in if they work for him or if he has any more that he wants to add. That's fine too. But yeah, let's take it away right off the bat. Let's hope they help. First thing here is finding your most productive time and using it for deep work sessions. So this is kind of a simple one to understand, but there's a lot to it. So essentially, everyone has a different time that they're most effective in. And because we're allowed to work from home now with the pandemic, and a lot of people were working from home because we're developers anyway, and we usually are allowed to, you can kind of flex your schedule to accommodate for those times. So for some people, it's early in the morning. You know, some people have different sessions, and for me, actually, I fall under the different sessions. So I'll have a really good deep working session in the morning, anywhere between like 8 and 9 a.m. to like about 11 a.m. I can work really well, and I can have like a good amount of work done. My brain works really well, all that. And then I kind of taper down up until lunchtime. And then after lunch, usually around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I'll have another deep work session. And again, these deep work sessions can be anywhere from like 2 hours, 3 hours to maybe even 25 minutes, 25-minute blocks. It could be, 3 hours, 2 hours. Like it's in between there. It depends on how you're feeling that day. But I find that if I don't stay to those sessions, I get a lot less done. So let's say I have a busy morning of calls instead of my deep work session. I'll find that day is a lot less productive than if I schedule my calls and my meetings for the time that I'm less effective. So that's kind of that's my idea of how to schedule around your productive time. Now, again, not everyone has the luxury. A lot of people are forced to work their 9 to 5s. And then in that case, again, it's the employer that's really missing out the most, not only you, because they're not getting the most work from you for the time that they're giving you to work on it. Because you're not going to, if you're working 9 to 5 and they don't give you any extra hours to work, no overtime, then what's the point of you going and working in the evening if that's when you work best and helping out your employer for no money? You're not going to do that, and nor should you. So if you have that kind of situation where you're more of a evening worker, like late night worker, maybe it's best to actually speak to your employer and be like, hey, I work best at 8 p.m. to about 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. And that's when I get all my essential work done. Can we flex it so that I will, I can work half days in the morning so I can stay on the calls, but then in the evening, I'll get on and do the other half day. And then anywhere between like 12 and 5, I'll have to myself. So you can do whatever the heck you want, obviously, but I find that if I schedule my days around these work sessions, I get a better day out of it.
And I actually kind of want to toss something in. So I'm definitely a weird worker. Sometimes I'll work super, super late. Sometimes I'll work till maybe like 11, which is super late for some. But for me, something like I just don't go to bed all that early. I will go to bed at 3 a.m. is a commonplace time for me to go to sleep, kind of thing. And so I will say that sometimes people will limit themselves. So Mike's saying sort of the constraint of the 9 to 5. But I find that sometimes people will limit themselves just due to something else that could be moved. So, for example, I hear people say like, well, it's 6, I have to eat now. Or it's 8, I have to do this now. But in reality, you are in control. You might have some stuff that can't move due to other obligations, certainly, of course. Maybe you have to pick your kids up or something after school, in which you're not going to be able to change the school day to have flexible hours. But short of something along those lines, you realistically have control of that. And there's been times where I've been like, well, you're going to be tired tomorrow, but maybe because you're in the mood, or maybe you're just going to rip through this, why don't you just stay up that extra hour and just sort of finish X thing, right? And whereas some people would argue with me saying, hey, that's unhealthy, telling someone to stay awake, that's just sort of what I do. So Mike will get text messages that he'll check in the morning from me, sometimes at 4 or 5 a.m. because I'll be in bed, I can't sleep. So then I just pull out my iPad, or maybe I'm on my phone, and I'll look up articles or ideas for the podcast, or look up ideas, or even research stuff that I'm doing for clients. That's just sort of how I deal with it, where I think, well, I'm awake anyway. I'm not like I'm having the greatest time just laying here. I may as well look something up and try to be a little bit productive, so that if I want to sleep in a bit, because I have been awake, obviously, then I can actually do that and not be super stressed. And then if a client calls, I can say, hey, this is the situation. I was looking at X last night. This is what I was doing. Or, now when I sit down, I know exactly what I want to start on, type of thing. So I just feel like having flexible work hours is key, but you being flexible with your time as well is key.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the big takeaway from that is, again, like sometimes you'll work late at night, but as long as you don't have to have that 9 to 5, you can wake up, 10, 11, 12 a.m. or 12 p.m. and still have a full day. So you adjust your schedule based on how your body works. Again, everyone's body is different. Everyone reacts differently to these things. And it's best to actually, listen to your own body. And sometimes that takes some time. So if you've always been a 9 to 5 person and you think that your best time is, in that 9 to 5 period, maybe you're right, but maybe you're wrong because you've never tried it. So maybe you should try an evening work session. Maybe you should try like a really early morning work session. Try different things and see what works best for you. It's a good idea to sometimes like also change it up, because we change over time. And sometimes you'll grow out of your working session. So maybe, late at night worked well for you when you were 18, 19, 20, 21, but now you're changing more towards a morning session. So again, every once in a while, change it up, see what works best for you, and try to stick to that for as much as you possibly can, if your job allows it.
And I actually have a comment on that too. So one of the things that one of the more strict things they'll do with themselves is to have a very specific bedtime. Now, I know that there's evidence out there, or at least my sleep app tells me, that I should be trying to sleep or have a consistent bedtime and a consistent wake-up time. And I assume that's based in science somewhere. Again, I don't know. I'm just trusting an app's pop-up. But to me, and maybe this is you too, maybe you're just being too strict on yourself, to me, I just sort of go to sleep when I'm exhausted. And I have quite a few friends, actually, that have the same thing. I don't know whether that's the healthiest thing in the world or whatever, but it does allow me to be productive, where sometimes if I'm, let's say, working on something earlier in the day, I don't quite get as far as I'd like. So then I go and I have plans that night, like leisurely plans. I go out with friends or whatever. So I go do that. Then when I come back, most people would say, okay, you got to go to sleep so you can wake up early and do work. Sometimes I'm in the mood. I'm already awake. I'll just say, well, it's 2 a.m. or 3 a.m, but I'm ready to do this. Let's just go edit the podcast now. I'll finish at 5, go to sleep at 5, whatever. Because there's in terms of productivity, I don't know about sleep health. Please consult the doctor about that. But in terms of my own productivity, now I'm actually personally going to sleep better, because not only am I now really tired because it's 5 a.m, but I'm also going to have that one less thing the next day, that one less thing on my plate. And now I'm just not worried about it and not thinking about it. And personally, I'm going to sleep better.
Yeah, exactly. And person to person, it's all different. I think as long as you're getting your sleep every day, that's the important one. And then on top, for some people, maybe the consistency of sleep is really important. And again, like you said, consult your doctor if you're having issues with sleep, especially. Maybe don't try this. But if you're comfortable, changing up your schedule on a daily basis, then totally do it and get the most out of your day as you can, while maintaining health, obviously. But with that, let's move on to the next developer habit here, and that's using version control right from the start. So we've talked about this quite a bit. With version control, I'm referring to Git usually. I know there's Mercurial or something like that. I've never used it. Don't plan on using it unless I have to. Git has been just perfectly fine for all my projects, and I'll stick to that. But yeah, the idea is when you start coding, whether that be your first time coding or whether that be just starting up a project, it's sometimes, better, or like it feels faster to just go and start like a new project without doing any sort of Git initialization and start writing code as fast as possible, I would say jump back on that a little bit and start your project with your Git repository, because it'll help you avoid having many issues down the road. Because a lot of the time, and let's face it, if you say you're going to do it later, you don't do it later, or you do it way too late, or you do it like, a month down the line. And at that point, the Git repository is already kind of mature, and you don't have the advantage of Git, which is the version control aspect. So what it allows you to do, if you do set it up from the very beginning, it allows you to kind of see a history of your code. And the history of your code will make you a better programmer in the end, because as you go through iterations of your project, versions of your project, you'll see that you're optimizing certain things. You'll see that you're creating a better structure and stuff like that. And when you go and you have to look back at an issue maybe, or something that you did a long time ago, you'll see the growth, and that'll motivate you to keep moving forward. Not only that, when you're applying for jobs, when you're looking for advancement in your workplace, a lot of the time they'll look at your Git repos and they'll see how you're managing your projects. And if they see that you check in once a month, then they don't know what you're doing in between that month time. Like they don't have a very good analysis of your workflow. They don't know how you code. But if you're checking in consistently daily, a couple times a week, whatever, as long as it's consistent and often, they can see a history of how you're progressing. So they don't really care about how you started. They want to see how you're doing, and if you're moving up, if you're understanding their concepts, if you're learning something new, if you're creating better structured code. They want to see improvement for the most part. And that's how you can show improvement with this version control. So that's just one of the benefits. The other benefits are you'll prevent data loss. Again, version control allows you to restore backups, like restore older versions. I don't rely on it solely because who knows what can happen to the repo. It could get deleted. If you have multiple people in a repo, especially, it can get really frustrating to restore backups because you don't know which branch to restore and stuff like that. So I do manual backups as well on top of it, but it does help in a lot of instances if you have the Git repo for like as a backup as well.
Well, to clarify for people as well that maybe don't, it's when you're doing, like, when you push your code to let's say GitHub, it's actually basically cloud storing that code. Just as an FYI, it's not like you have like a backup folder on your computer somewhere. It's actually storing it on their servers so that you could pull it down to, say, your secondary computer.
Exactly. And when you do a change to that code and you push that change, it's storing the fact that you made a change and the change that you made. So it's storing kind of two different things. And the way it manages data, instead of storing, two separate files, it'll actually store just the change of that file. So it manages so that the package doesn't become, ridiculously big because you're constantly duplicating. So it's pretty smart in that way. But the other thing that it can help you prevent is regression bugs. So regression bugs are something like, let's say you create a feature for your project, and you're working on the feature for a couple weeks, and then you create that feature, and there's a bug that you see, and you fix that bug, and you have the feature. Now, a week down the line, you have another feature that you're working on, and you create that feature, and then all of a sudden, when you're creating that feature, the same bug that you had before happens again. Because what you did was you kind of did the exact same workflow that you did for the previous bug, and didn't notice it, because again, like, you can't keep everything in your head. What Git allows you to do is then go back to how you fixed it before and apply that same knowledge, because again, it has that version control aspect. Or even revert a previous commit and then see that if it works. You can do A/B testing in that way. Like you can kind of revert a previous commit, see if everything is okay there, or a previous version, and then see what's the difference between the two versions, which will also prevent bugs. It'll allow you to have multiple development environments. So a lot of the time, people work on multiple computers. Like if you have, a work computer and a home computer, and you want to do some work from home, all you have to do is just pull down your repo and you're good to go. Now, it does involve more than that. You'll have to set up your development environment. You have to set up your servers. It depends on how complex your project is, but the Git repo is a really good start for that. And a lot of the time now, there's this thing called Docker, which will set up your development environment for you. I've kind of delved into it a little bit more last few days or last few weeks, and it's really, I could see it being really powerful, especially for team environments where they have more complex structures like, a server side component, a database, and a middleware or something like that, plus the front end. If you have 4 of those and you need to set up a consistent environment, something like Docker inside of a Git repo is really powerful, because all you have to do is run this one command called Docker Compose Up, and it'll build everything for you, etc., etc. I think we have had an episode on Docker, so go check it out. I think in the future we will do another deeper dive on Docker, because there's a lot to talk about with it. Next thing here is not being afraid to look it up. So again, something we've talked about in the past many times, but I want to reiterate. What you think what you think might be an issue, and you're the only one that's experienced, is most likely an issue that a lot of people have experienced. And if you just do a quick search on Google or a quick search in the documentation, you have a way better chance of solving the issue than just sitting there and hitting your head against a wall and trying a million different things on your own without looking anything up. So that's why I kind of, one of the first things I do, I wouldn't say the first, I'll try a few common things that I always do for every issue, but then I'll go and look it up, because there's no point in wasting my time. There's no point in wasting your client's time. There's no point in wasting your company's time if someone's already solved it for you and the code's readily available, or the idea of the solution is readily available somewhere and you can implement it yourself. Always don't be afraid to go and look up stuff on Google. I know a lot of developers have told me personally that they think that they're a less of a developer if they Google almost all the issues that they have. And I don't think that at all, because it shows that you have the knowledge to solve issues, solve problems. It shows that you have the knowledge of how to Google the issue, because that's not an easy skill to learn either. It takes a lot of experience, and it takes a lot of screwing up and, doing a bunch of different things, because the better developer you are, essentially, the better you are at Googling issues.
Actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, actually, like, one way to put it is you're not really gaining, like, when you're learning, as you slowly learn and you build up your knowledge, like you're saying, a lot of people, a lot of devs will think they're less because they keep looking things up consistently. But in reality, you're not really gaining knowledge of that syntax and of that programming knowledge. Like, yes, you are in the interim, but the instant you move on to another project that's in a different code base, it's gone. That knowledge is going to be gone. That syntax, all that's going to be gone. But what stays with you is the expertise. You are actually just slowly gaining expertise in whatever you're doing. I equate it loosely to, if you say, call yourself a JavaScript expert, and you know about a whole bunch of different things about JavaScript, how to like write the code, how to conveniently save stuff, how to do all the rest of it, like every little bit, right? Not going to get into it because it's obviously a full programming language. But if you go into, let's say, Stack Overflow or a popular forum, you go into Stack Overflow, a popular forum, and you actually go and you look and you see in the JavaScript section a bunch of questions that you don't know how to answer. That's just because those people, they may have the exact amount of experience as you do, but there's so many complexities with code, and there's so many different wildcards that all you're gaining throughout your career is just purely 100% expertise. Taking it to something that I know really well, and Mike does too, IT, if you think about it, when there's an issue, I can kind of tell you, it's probably this. It might be like I can almost say it's probably hardware. It's probably the hard drive. It's probably the RAM. Or I can say, it's probably software. It sounds like a Microsoft service going crazy. And I have different things in my own sort of expertise toolkit, if you will, where maybe I'll make a new user account and see if the corruption is there. Is it that drive? Let's move that around. Those are things that are in my expertise. But every single issue, short of it being something routine and regular and something like that, like a hard drive failure, short of it being that, you need to look it up, because Windows and everything else is constantly changing. And that you'll see that same change in Stack Overflow questions in, say, the JavaScript section from 5 years ago to today. The questions will be completely different. Certainly there'll be some overlap because you'll be in one category, but you're still going to be confused by questions 5 years ago, and you're going to be confused from questions today, and those questions themselves are going to be different. The main thing is that you need to know your field. You need to know how to do that Googling. You need to know how to tackle the issue, and you need to know how to phrase your own question if you need to ask somebody else, or ask on Stack Overflow. And then you still have thousands of people that are going to see your question potentially, but only maybe 5, 10, depending on how popular your question are going to answer. And that's because those people are experiencing a similar thing or are currently working in or recently worked on a similar environment or a similar code base or a similar project that you're working on right now. But those other thousands of people, whereas some probably didn't care and just passed by, there's literally probably going to be hundreds, if not thousands, that knew or that didn't know how to answer your question because they just don't know the answer straight up. And that's because there's just too much. Tech is huge, and there's no way you're going to remember all that. I can't remember how much RAM is in my watch, and I wear it every day, right? It's just something that I just don't, and people just don't retain because it's not needed. I'll just go Google this watch, figure out how much RAM's in it. Same thing with programming problems.
Exactly. And not only don't people retain it, they shouldn't retain it. That's kind of the argument that I make as well. When you're learning different technologies, especially if you're like a full stack developer and you're working over a startup and you have a bunch of projects that you're working on and they're in different stacks, you should not, and I repeat, you should not become an expert to the point where you memorize the syntax of every language that you know. Because if you do, you're not going to get anything done. It's just, I mean, unless you have perfect memory, like there's some people out there that have like, you know, quote unquote photographic memory. I know it doesn't exist, but there are people that are close to that. They might be in a different ballpark. But again, the regular person should not memorize every little programming concept every time they do a problem. When you do something 5, 10, 15 times because of something like, for instance, you're writing an if statement in JavaScript. If that's something that you've done 15, 20 times, you don't need to look up the syntax. Great. You know, don't, you know, berate yourself the fact that you memorize something, but don't go out of your way to read documentation 15 times just so you don't have to go and look it up again. Because the fact that you know where to look in the documentation, that's all you need to know.
Yeah,
that's it.
100%.
And the fact that you can go in, look at the documentation, and then use that knowledge, that's a different step, and it's a great step. And that's what people are looking for. Like if I'm going to be looking for another developer to work with, that's the kind of stuff that I'll be testing him on. I'm not going to be testing him on, you know, write me this syntax, like a JavaScript function that can, you know, sort an array without any sort of documentation that can do X, Y, and Z. Like I'm not going to tell him to do that like from his head. There's going to be some simple concepts like what's an if statement in pseudocode, what's a for loop, what's a while loop. Those simple concepts, yes, understand what they are. But to implement them, that's a different knowledge base, and that's something that you shouldn't keep in your mind unless again, you've done it over and over again. With that though, I'll move on to the next one here, which is knowing when to switch tasks or take a break. So this one's a pretty big one too, because it'll make you a more effective developer. So it's one of those things that help you avoid lost time. No one likes to leave a problem unsolved, but sometimes when all you're doing is bashing your head against the wall, it's better to just take a step back and try to focus on something else. I mean, we've all been there, like, you know, same issue, tried 15 different ways to approach it. Nothing's working. It's just making us more frustrated. Like we have that buildup of frustration. I know when I'm there because I start swearing a lot. That's kind of an indication. I start trying things that don't make any sense just to see if they'll work. Stuff like that. Those are the indicators for myself where I'm like, okay, I'm getting to the point where I'm not gonna solve this unless I miraculously stomp on the issue. So what I'm gonna do is, if I'm not that frustrated, I'll move on to a different task. Because I'm usually, when I'm working, I have like a task list. Usually when I'm working, I have multiple projects. So I can even switch to a completely different project if I want to. I know I don't recommend doing that a lot, but sometimes it does help to get your mind completely off one task and focus on completely something else. Or if I'm to the point where I am swearing and I am bashing my head against the wall and I don't want to be there, I'll just stand up and I won't be there. Because that's the flexibility that we have when we're working remotely, when we're working for ourselves, when we're working with a flexible team, flexible schedules. We can take a break, take a half hour, go for a walk, do some exercise, watch some TV, play a game, whatever. Get your mind off of it. Go to sleep, because sometimes it's at night. That helps the most. Like if you just go to sleep and completely forget about the task, that's the best way. You come back with a fresh mind, try different things. Knowing when to actually step back from something is a skill that is developed over time. Don't beat yourself up because you're not doing it right away, but it's something that you should be aware in yourself. What's the point where I'm not as effective? Like, what's the point where I'm trying things for no reason? What's the point where I'm getting angry for no reason? Those are the indicators for you to actually take a step back. So with that, next thing here is writing human readable code. And this is kind of, I mean, I've been preaching this all along, but I've always been on the side of less comments and cleaner code. If you write if you write unobtrusive code that you can actually read. So instead of writing like, var A, var B, actually write like var page num, var image number, whatever. If you actually write the variable that is actually referencing, or write a function that's actually doing something, like in English, like this function. So if the function is iterating it over an array of images, the function name can be iterate image array, something like that, something simple and clean. When you're writing that kind of code, what it helps you do is, if you need to come back later, and you will, just trust me on this. You're doing a project and you think, oh, I'm never going to go back to this project. You will. And not only that, not only will you at some point come back to it, maybe your team members might come back to it. Or maybe you're working in an environment where you're constantly sharing code. In that case, it's a necessity. And you should develop this habit right from the very beginning. Because if you're writing for a multi-team project, multi-person project, everyone needs to be able to read your code. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there in meetings all day explaining every little piece of your code, and your team members are going to hate you most likely for it, because you're wasting their time, you're wasting your own time. Your boss is going to get pissed off because and then second of all, if you're writing everything being like extremely arbitrary. So again, if you use var A, var B, function 1, function 2, instead of actually writing names, and then you're writing comments on top of it. So you're writing, you're writing comment, this variable is the image number variable. Var A is equal to whatever. And then the next one is the same thing. You write the comment of exactly what it is. You're wasting your time. And you're wasting the people that are reading its time, because again, they have to read the comment in full, then connect it to the variable that hopefully you've clearly written the comment beside it or on top of it, which you're going to screw up anyway. So write clean code as much as you possibly can. Again, it's a habit. It's one of those things where you have to just do it over and over again. Get code reviews. People will tell you what they don't understand, what they do understand. Fix those things. So when someone doesn't understand something, fix it so that they do. Write it in a way that makes sense to them, and that'll make your code better. Next thing here is knowing when to get feedback. So this is a big one, and it's actually something that is not covered a lot. So the idea of this is, when you're working on a project, it's always scary to get feedback on it before it's finished, in quote unquote finished. So we don't know when a project is going to be finished, and that's where the problem lies in. So if you're working on something and you want to make something perfect, and you want, your entire vision is put into it, and you want to, spend 5 months on it, and then you're like, okay, it's in the state where I can show it. And you go and show it to someone, show it to your friends, or show it to the target audience that you're building it for. And they're like, well, I don't understand this. I don't understand this. I don't understand that. Why did you do it like that? Like, when I go in and I do my, if it's an accounting program, when I go in and I put in my invoices, I do it like this, X, Y, and Z, and they tell you how they do it. Getting that feedback early on would have helped you avoid all of those problems, because right now you have a stable code base. What you have to go do is rewrite your stable code base. You have to do a lot of work to do that. Everyone knows when they get to that stable code base, it's kind of a pain to add features, to change everything from scratch. There are a lot of times where you have to rebuild from scratch. Matt and I have talked about it. List by Design is a prime example where it's an app that's kind of like a bookmark manager app, and we built it one way. We put a lot of time into it, and then we got feedback, and the users are like, don't know how to use it. Like, this isn't the way I use these apps. And we had multiple users say that, and we're like, oh shit, now we have to go rebuild it. Had we gotten feedback even earlier, like we got feedback pretty early, but had we gotten feedback even earlier, we would have saved us a lot of time, and we would have built the app better, and it would have been a lot more extendable. Like, there's a lot of benefits to it. So when you have, the idea is, make something that you can show the target audience. Whether that be a very simple MVP of your app, like a very, doesn't have to be designed designed out perfectly. It doesn't have to work perfectly as long as you can explain it away. It can even be high fidelity click-through demo or something like that, like just images. Don't be afraid to show it just because you might get your feelings hurt that, you know, your idea isn't the right one, because your idea most likely won't be the right one right off the bat. You want to get that feedback. You want your friends to be like, well, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. I would use it like this. And then you can implement those changes and make your app way better right from the get-go. Now, there's a disclaimer to this. If you go and ask one of your best friends to look at your app and he rips it apart or says it's amazing, that's not enough of a data point. And that's why you have to get at least a few people, and a few people from different demographics, hopefully, in your target audience, so that you can see if their criticism line up. Because, again, users don't know exactly what they want, so you have to take that into account as well a little bit, because they're going to ask for stuff that doesn't make sense sometimes. And second of all, they're going to ask for things that you can't do. They're going to ask you to be like, hey, can you pull in the entire internet for this for whatever reason? Like, it'll just make, my life 1 second easier. Like, can you just pull in the entire, I just want the internet. Just in this app. Just pull it in. It's no problem. They'll say stuff like that because they don't know the technical side. It's not their fault. But you have to explain why you're not doing that, and then put on top of it, be like, but this, and this will make it better. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of that's the way to deal with feedback. And on that note, I don't know if people have listened or known about this, but I've started a live stream on Twitch where I'm going through creating this little D&D Monsters app with Vue.js. And one of the next episodes we're going to be doing is actually bringing in a couple of my friends that are D&D dungeon masters. And we're going to show them the app, and it's in very early stages. You'll see if you ever take a look at it on Twitch, HTML, all the things. And I'm going to go through them and be like, hey, this is my idea. Is it something that you can, where does it need to improve? Is it something that you would use? What are the features that you would need for you to use this? And we're going to take their feedback and we're going to implement it almost right away, at least as much as I possibly can, and then bring them back in at a later stage and be like, now what about now? And that'll show the feedback process, because you want to get feedback early and often. That's the phrase that people say.
There's also another thing too, I was going to say, is there's an art to asking for feedback sometimes. So what I'm thinking of specifically is a point in which you have something complete, whether the actual project is complete or whether a certain section of the project is complete, and you need to show it to the client. They're expecting it. If you say completed it earlier than the deadline, let's just hypothetically say the deadline is on Tuesday, you completed it on Friday night. You might want to strategically, sleep on it and have the weekend and then check on it on Monday and then send it into them. That might just allow you to be more comfortable where you're like, you were exhausted on Friday, you finally finished it, end of the day, I'm done with this thing over the weekend, I'll just check on it on Monday and send it. But it also offers a bit of a feedback buffer, if you will. So you are going to be super, super annoyed if you send this thing in at 4:30 or 5 p.m. on a Friday to your client, and they're just so happen to be at their computer, and then they start sending you feedback in which now you're going to be thinking of all weekend. So sometimes it's just best, especially if you're a person, and I'm one of them, where I just get annoyed and end up usually fixing it or commenting back, and then it's a whole weekend conversation of just back and forth conversation, which is fine, which is what you wanted, but not on your days off sort of thing. So if you're super done with something on a Friday, or if you're just super done with it that day and you're going to come back the next day, don't be afraid to A, sleep on it, and B, just delay within reason until you actually want that feedback. You don't need someone complaining about the headings on something when you spent all day working on the whole thing, and it has sliders and images and light boxes and more complex UI elements like that, only to have them say, why is the headline not in font size 30? And then you're like, oh, here we go. And now we got to take that apart, and now that heading looks weird, and you're messing around with it. And then before you know it, it's 9 p.m. You're still at the office trying to work on some feedback when you could have just waited for Monday.
So one of the ways that I kind of avoid that issue for the most part is that early stage feedback, that first set of drafts, that, the wireframes. I like to have a live session with the client or with the target audience, whatever, however your project is working. Like if you're building a website for a client, then it's a client. And if you want that feedback, because what it does is it helps stop those thoughts right as they become. Because as soon as you show him that, he'll be like, oh, what that heading? And then you'll be like, no. We're not talking about the heading right now. Like that'll be worked out at a later date. We're talking about X, Y, and Z. And you can write that in an email and all that, but
they're going to
I'm
ignore
sorry,
it.
no one is going to read that email. No one reads emails. I don't know what it is. I don't even read them. I don't think. Like maybe I do. I try to, but like maybe I don't read them because I don't think emails actually work for the most part. It's a good way to keep accountability and keep a paper trail. But other than that, sometimes you do need to get on a call. That early one is the most important one. After that, once you set expectations, it's a little bit easier to just send them it and get the feedback in because, again, you've made it clear what you're looking for in that initial call. That's how I try to avoid it. But you're right. Get your feedback when you feel you're going to be comfortable receiving it. Like on a Friday night, if you don't want to ruin your weekend, if you're strong against, if you take it to heart sometimes, then do it on a Monday or a Tuesday. That is good advice in general. All right. Next thing here is becoming a strong debugger. So debugging is not just a skill you'll need every once in a while. It's something you'll be using literally on a daily basis. There are plenty of tools to help you with this, but just getting deep into your code and understanding the workings of how you're writing, like understanding how that for each function works that you're using on that array, understanding how map works, understanding stuff like that will help you know where to start looking in your code when a problem arises, right? So if you have an error in your code that has something to do with having too many elements in an array or reading, you're trying to read an element before it's been initialized, like you're trying to read a name of an object before you even put an object in there. Stuff like that will give you, if you understand how that object works, you'll know where to look because you'll be like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm initializing the object over here. I should be initializing it over there. Then also you can use tools. Like I've always said, Chrome DevTools. I use it tons. On the live stream, like I said before, I kind of went through a bunch of the debugging that I've been doing. Put breakpoints, use console logs, whatever works for you, right? But become good at it and become okay with it. That's another thing. I know a lot of people kind of fear debugging, like fear issues. That's not a good place to be, and you should welcome it. You should write your code manageable, fastest and as fast as possible and clean. But you should be willing and know that there's going to be issues and you're ready to solve them. That's the state that you should be in to be a good developer. That's a habit that you should have, is writing the code and getting ready to debug whatever. I think that's kind of when I knew that I was getting the hang of it. When I was like, I'm okay with this failing because I know where to look if it fails.
Where would you say people should go to learn how to debug? Because I remember years ago, I was just debugging with, I mean, I still do this because I don't touch that all that much, but console logs and stuff like that, where like I know like it works, like, you know, I know where to, like, I know something's wrong in here, so I'm using console logs to figure out where stuff is. But you said, oh, go into I think it was the debug tab and in the inspect element, and you put in some breaks and all this other crap. Like, where would you suggest going to learn those particular tricks that are better than just constantly rerunning the thing and checking console logs, and you're like, oh, the problem's not here, the problem's not here, the problem's not here, because that's kind of what console.log becomes.
I got taught it, like, in a working session with a developer that I was working with.
Oh, okay.
So that's where I learned it, but there's plenty of resources online. Like if you Google Chrome developer tool, DevTools debugging, it'll go through every step. Like there's network debugging, performance debugging, there's, again, console log debugging, and each one has a purpose. Like I still use console logs every once in a while if I need consistent outputs and I need to see what's going on every time, so I don't have to breakpoint every time. I'll use a console log. But a lot of the time, what the breakpoint allows you to do is see where your variables are at that specific breakpoint, at that specific point in the code. So not only do you, like, you know, see where the error can be, you see what your, like, again, that frame or image num variable, what it's set to, what's your image actually set to. Like, what if you're using an API, you can check what your response was in the API, stuff like that. So you can check everything inside of that breakpoint that's currently happening in your code. And that helps. For me, that probably solves like 80% of my issues. Is as long as I can see what's inside, what's happening at that specific time in the code before the error occurs, I'll be like, oh, you know what? It was because there was no name in this object and it needed a name. And so I'll go back and I'll set the name earlier or something like that. So that's where I learned it. Again, I'm sure YouTube has, I'm sure Medium has, I'm sure Dev.to has tons of tutorials on Chrome DevTools. If you want, I can look up some and we can link it in the show notes.
Sure.
Let's do that. But essentially, yeah, be willing to debug. And the more you debug, the better you become. That's it. Next thing and last thing here is managing communications. This is a big one because usually developers work in teams and it's important to be able to communicate efficiently with your project managers as well as your fellow developers. If you're not properly managing that communication, it can take up way too much time and it can cut down on your coding time, which will hurt not only the people that you're talking to usually, but it'll hurt your boss and it'll hurt the project deadline. It'll, extend everything. So make sure you have a calendar for scheduling meetings. You're not just doing it willy-nilly on a notepad or something, or you're just doing it in your head. Have a calendar so you can actually do weekly audits and see if those meetings are taking up too much time. And if they are, then maybe you can either cut down on a couple meetings, maybe you can move a couple meetings so that they're outside of your peak programming hours, like we talked about in the first habit. So just try to schedule meetings when you're not going to be your most efficient. Like you don't want to schedule them when you're asleep because then you're going to be asleep. You're going to miss the meeting, or you're not going to be paying attention because you want to sleep. But schedule them in the times like around lunch. I usually like to do a lot of meetings around there, either like right before lunch, after lunch, because I usually need some spin up time after lunch, and before lunch I'm okay with taking a little bit of time to talk to people. And then like at the end of my workday, I can have a few meetings and stuff like that. But during my peak hours for programming, I try my best, and it doesn't work all the time because, you have to be wary some of other people's schedules. But I try my best to schedule them around so that they don't get into my peak programming hours. But also, on the other hand, don't be afraid of meetings as well, because you need to be able to communicate. That's another thing. Communication is really, really key. It doesn't have to be daily, but a daily, 20-minute dev stand-up is a really good thing to have on a project because it allows you to, have that check-in, make sure that no one's blocking each other, make sure that everything that you need is being passed on. So sometimes it takes a couple days to get something that you need. So if you have a daily check-in, it'll accelerate that, because if it's weekly, you'll obviously have to wait a couple weeks in that kind of scenario. But again, meetings are a really complicated thing. A lot of the time they are heavy on stuff that you don't need, so you got to be able to balance it.
Yeah, meetings are always sort of associated with a time sink, and with a time sink, and people just basically a time sink and an eye roll is basically what I'm trying to get at, where people are like, here we go, we got to go talk to Bill again or whoever. It's a whole thing but there are, if planned correctly, if you have people that are essentially presenting, if they have their stuff together, and if you're actually tackling things and it just doesn't become a chat fest, then for the most part, those meetings are extremely crucial. Sometimes I find that meetings tend to balloon in terms of how many people are included within them. So it'll be like, let's just have the accountant on this one. And then you guys end up talking about, I don't know, the LEDs in your computer for some reason. And it's like, why is the accountant here? Why isn't only the the technology guys in here? Why is the accountant in here? And I've found that a lot, where you just kind of sit on mute. I've been in tons of meetings where I just sort of sit on mute, and then it's like, I announce my presence in the beginning, say farewell at the end, and that's actually my entire experience in that meeting. And it was completely useless to me. I didn't need to write anything down. I didn't need to be there. And so that's a big one. But meetings are, like you're saying, are really crucial. But I think it's critical that you need to put as much stuff as you can into a meeting. Now, that's not saying that you should be having your technical conversations and your accounting conversations and your ideas for the future all in one meeting. Certainly not. I think it's sort of a one topic per meeting, as far in terms of if the topics are big enough, of course. But like, some teams will always have a morning meeting. Sometimes those are useless. The fact that if it's a meeting in which if someone's going to be late to work and that meeting didn't matter, that meeting's useless. That's the way I'd say it. If it's like, well, like, Jim that couldn't show up today, that meeting's useless. But if Jim doesn't show up today and he needs to be caught up, that's a crucial meeting. I think that's sort of how you should gauge if your meeting is important enough. Sometimes it just isn't, and you should just post it on your company board, however, like whatever chat app you have, or post it in your group chat and say, we need to have this, or whatever it is. Or maybe you have a conversation with just one person really quick, and the other two topics that you're going to put in the meeting are just shared via, like I said, the company board, or just shared to the group chat, something like that. I think all that type of stuff. Some people are meeting happy, I think is also another point, is what I'm trying to get at. Some people are just meeting happy. And I think that oftentimes will stem from people that aren't necessarily on the front lines. So developers are sort of more on the front lines. IT is sort of more on the front lines. If you're working in a company like landscaping, the landscapers are on the front lines. But there's people that are the people in the office. Let's take the landscaping company for a non-technology example. The people that are in the office are going to be more meeting happy and more prone to calling you and stuff like that, because that's their environment. They're just sort of the office folk, they're the accountants and those type of people that are doing the business administration stuff, but are not doing the product. They're not creating the product. They're not working with the product. They're not fixing the product, as, let's say, in technology, bringing it back, like IT would fix the product, how a dev would create the product, those type of things. I think that the people that are in the office are the meeting happy ones oftentimes, because that's just like how they thrive. And that's how the devs and everyone else, landscapers, that's how they get pulled in. And then it's like, why was this guy, why was he even here? Why was he looped into this? And it's just sort of like, well, it's a meeting. Like, what do you want? It's like, well, this guy's busy. He's supposed to be digging this trench for this pool, or this guy's coding. He's supposed to be making this slider, and he could have been done this slider, and then I could have talked to him about the slider after. But instead, he sat here, listened about the shape of coins or some crazy thing, or like the budgeting for the year, and he doesn't even care about the budgeting for the year, short of if the company's going bankrupt and he's not going to be paid. So I know my notes on this have been a bit ranty, but that's how meetings get blown out of proportion. So meetings should be as short as they can be, as packed as they can be within reason, and only include the people that actually need to be there.
It's a balancing act, and it's really tough to achieve all those points. But when it does get achieved, it's really nice. I know. Okay, so for example, we have a daily stand-up for the projects that I'm working on right now, and it's one of those situations where it'll be like up and down sometimes. It's been really up for the last probably 6 months or so, so I don't remember even a downtime at this point. But there was a time when, you're right, like if I wasn't at the meeting, I wouldn't have to get caught up. Right. There was a time, and there was a lot of times when, if that was the case, we would cancel the meeting. That's the thing.
Well, that's good. At least there's the flexibility there, where it's like, guys, if we all show up, we're just gonna be talking about like what we're all having for lunch. So who cares?
Exactly. But for the last like 6 months or so, it's been literally like, if I have to miss the meeting, I have kind of anxiety, because I know how much I'm gonna miss. And not only will I have to get caught up, I usually don't get caught up enough. Because so many, like, it's a meeting with like 5 or 6 people now, and everyone gives their updates, and everyone's updates are pretty intertwined with each other's projects, tasks, and so like that's when you need a meeting. That's when you need a daily meeting, and the meeting lasts half an hour every day. Like, we barely ever go over that, so it's pretty efficient, and we're literally talking work for 28 of those 30 minutes. So there is a way to achieve maximum efficiency in meetings, to the point where we're like dreading going to the meeting, because it's information you actually need, and you're not going to be bored out of your mind there. And B, you actually need the meeting to like do your tasks. But again, like Matt said, it's a really big balancing act. And I think, having said that, we should do an episode on meetings.
Yeah.
And how to manage them, and how to organize them, and how to like have a productive daily stand-up versus an unproductive daily stand-up, how to, communicate with your clients, how to set up a meeting. Like there's a lot that we can talk about in terms of meetings that I think will be valuable for people that are either just starting out and don't have a lot of meetings on their schedule and want to hear about how it goes, and B, for people that are kind of more seasoned and have a bunch of useless meetings, and maybe they can go in and be the change in their company.
And also, we could also discuss other things too, where what's the difference between a quick phone call more frequently than a bigger meeting, stuff like that. I think that's a really great example of that, because everyone experiences meetings, freelancers, corporate guys, IT, everyone experiences meetings at some point in their career. Mechanics, like everybody, everybody in every field experiences some sort of meeting. So I think it's such a thing. And we can also cover another thing. I mean, this is more or less a teaser now for like a future episode, but also covering, and I'll mention this now because this is important, working as a team comes with experience. So like if your team has been working together for a month, they're going to have worse meetings than your team if they were working together for a year. As the team starts to become in sync, they know now what to bring to the meeting. They know what's expected. They know stuff like that. So your meetings are not going to be great right off the hop. You're not going to be able to get that balance, but your balance will get better as the team gets better working as a team in general anyway. So just a small tidbit there.
Yep. I added it to our Trello, so stay tuned for that episode on meetings.
That would have been a perfect segue if Trello was the sponsor. That would have been fantastic. Like, I added it to our Trello. Yeah, and by the way, like, we HTML all the things uses Trello every day. Like,
damn it. Next time while you're talking, I'm going to call the company and get them to sponsor us live on the show.
That would be, man, that's
That would
crazy.
be the most ridiculous transition ever. Like, we're like just live on the show. Can you just sponsor us real quick and just throw them on the actual live show?
I approve what episode is this? I approve episode 97 of the HTML All Things podcast. This is the CEO of Trello or something.
Yeah, it'd be so cool. But yeah, okay. So other than that, I think we're good on the habits. Let's move on to the web news.
Yeah. So this web news stems from, I had a conversation with a couple of our Discord folk, and then I was kind of thinking to myself, I've also been listening to a few podcasts in the space as well, and what I'm kind of seeing, and this actually lends itself nicely to the Googling issue as well, and imposter syndrome, is that nobody really discusses how tech is difficult. I kind of feel like we are in a fantasy world when it comes to careers of any type, and tech is included, where when we see these careers portrayed in something like a TV show or a movie, yes, I know they're pressed for time, but they are portrayed in such a way where it's just like, the guy will come up and be like, oh, I just had to redo the database. And that's sort of all you hear about the database. Now, certainly for entertainment purposes, of course, that's all you really want to hear. But it kind of portrays tech as easy. It sort of portrays it as very, very simple to even to even figure out that the database needed to be redone, whatever that means, right? Just figuring out or engineering a solution or thinking up ideas, workarounds, or determining what is wrong and what needs to be fixed if something is broken, that actually takes a lot of thought and a lot of expertise and a lot of research and everything. And so I just kind of wanted to touch on how I think this might be the number one underlying cause, and I have no statistics to back this up, this is just from my personal experience, of imposter syndrome. Where I think that people are reading up on if they want to learn design. So they start looking at design, and their first few videos they probably watch are short. And they don't understand a lot of the terms in that video. And that person that's portraying, that's let's say listing out or talking about the design, is throwing out terms because they expect the people to have a certain amount of experience. And maybe you're before that experience. You're immediately going to think to yourself, I'm not good enough for this. Clearly, this guy knows exactly what he's doing. He knows what colors to choose. He knows the typography to choose, etc. Same goes for tech too, and we've mentioned this a bunch of times where there's other tech podcasts or tech presentations or tech videos, tech content, where they talk at a level that expects the listener, the viewer, to know a certain amount, and it makes their years and years and years and years and years of expertise seem simple because they're talking at a year of. Like, let's say year 10 of their career, year 5 of their career, and you might be on hour 1 of yours. And so I just kind of wanted to touch on how that affects imposter syndrome, and how tech, even at year 10, is not easy.
Yeah, I think people don't talk about it because it's kind of a taboo topic. It's like the concept of the whole social media thing. So if you look at someone's social media, it's only going to show their, accomplishments. It's only going to show them at their best because they've staged all these photographs and stuff. So you start looking at people and being like, "Oh, what am I doing? Like, I'm screwing up because, every second thing that I do is a screw up." But what happens is that because all this content is out there and no one, or a lot less people, are talking about the difficulties of making that content or doing that coding or whatever, you become self-conscious with yourself. You look inwards and be like, is it my problem? Is like everyone else out there? Like, look at all these YouTube videos of people doing all this really complex coding stuff. I can't even make Hello World appear on the screen. Is that my problem? And it's just one of those things where you have to battle through it a little bit and know that you're not the only one. You're not the only one struggling with all these issues, because as soon as you look up an issue, and again, it's that fear of looking up issues, if you do spend some time and start Googling the issue, you'll see you're not the only one. And you'll see that you're ahead of some people. For the most part, you're always going to be ahead of someone, because even if you started 1 hour ago, there's going to be people starting 1 minute before you and stuff like that. So you're going to see that hierarchy. And that's going to make you feel a little bit better. And then you're going to get to a point where you're like, oh, I feel really good. And then you're going to get to an issue and it's going to make you feel a little bit down again because you feel like you should be able to solve it really quickly, but you're not solving it. And again, you're going to go through that situation where you're going to see the hierarchy. Like maybe you will solve the issue and it took you a little bit longer, but other people are behind you and they're struggling and you can help them go up too. So it's all about perspective. It's all about looking behind and in front of you, always trying to get better at it, right? And a good example of this was in my stream. If anyone was in there, I had an issue with initializing a Vue.js repo. And I spent half an hour through it. It's something that I've done, 20, 30 times at this point, probably. And I still had an issue with it. And I still looked it up and I still did the Googling. And yeah, it felt a little bit like an imposter syndrome kind of situation. But I knew because it's just one of those experiences that it's good to see other people do. I know if I was looking at someone like Wes Bos or Scott Talinsky and he was suffering through an issue, I'd feel better because we're not the only ones. You know what I mean? Someone that's worked in 10 years and starts doing a project from scratch will have a few things that they just forgot or a few things that they didn't think of or something like that they'll have to look up and get through. It's just part of the process. It's one of those things unless you have a photographic memory, you're not going to be able to memorize all the little things that you do 6 months ago or 7 months ago. Even if you've done them multiple times, it's just going to be a couple of things. My issue turned out to be a administrative privileges issue because I made a new account for my streaming and I didn't give it admin privileges. So I had to actually open up a command prompt with admin privileges. Everything was solved after that. So it's a stupid little thing like that. Again, I knew it. I knew that was that could be a problem, but I couldn't remember. I didn't remember it right off the bat, so I had to go through a couple troubleshooting steps, and then I'm like, oh yeah, it's this, and that's fine. I'm glad I got it on tape. I'm glad I look like an idiot there and all that, because now people can hopefully look at that live stream and be like, okay, I'm not the only one.
Well, that's the thing too, is especially with tech, things can go wrong at every little thing. A typo, an admin privilege. There could be something actually wrong with Windows or Mac, or there could be anything. It could be a plethora of things. You before the show were talking about how you're trying to troubleshoot your computer right now, and God knows what's wrong with that. Is it a RAM stick? Is it nothing? Is it Windows? Is it the hard drive? What is it? And even though we know how to check all of that, we're not privy to the issue. We don't just know what the problem is. Some things will scream at you, certainly, but other things really won't either. And that was another thing that you and I also had discussed, where it's good to have those type of things like your troubleshooting in the live stream, because a live stream is very much different than a video production. We're uploading our Twitch streams. They're available on Twitch for X amount of days, whatever a new account on Twitch is allowed as VODs. But then I'm also uploading them to YouTube so people can go back and watch those. But I was telling you that the streams, I'm clearly labeling as streams because they're different than a production. Literally different than a production. And if we had, let's say, somehow cut down the stream to 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and fit all the stuff that you put into that stream in there, and just to get that time code on YouTube to be 20 minutes, we'd probably have more views on there. Now I just uploaded it. Our YouTube channel's small, has 12 views, whatever. But let's say, not outside of the realm with a title like that we could have had 100 views or a couple hundred views, right? Because some people might be looking up how to do Elasticsearch with Vue.js and through a JSON dataset, right? So that's something that people might click on. But like what I told you is when people, let's say, YouTube that or Google that, whatever, and our video shows up, they're looking for a quick solution. They're looking for that 10-minute video. They don't want to watch the live stream necessarily if they're looking for a tutorial. Whereas other people are using the live stream as, one, they can interact live during the actual thing, but two, they're learning, but it's kind of like a video podcast to these people. It's like a different subset of people, or just maybe the same people, but at that time they're looking for something like that. And that produced video that we could have potentially made would not have shown the troubleshooting. It would not have shown the difficulties, would not have shown the elevated prompt, would not have shown anything. And then if somebody, let's say somebody like you goes in with our hypothetically 10-minute condensed produced little video, goes in and has that elevated prompt issue, they're going to be like, I'm an idiot, I'm done. And I guarantee tons of people have done, maybe not necessarily exactly the elevated prompt issue, but it doesn't matter what it is. They get one issue in to whatever they're doing, and then they're like, I'm done, I'm out of here. And it's because it's not really shown. Like you're saying, social media, or you mentioned, social media is very much, I'm not going to show, like yesterday I fell asleep on the couch and almost fell off the couch because I fell asleep down here so hard. Like I passed right out and then kind of woke up like half like dangling off the couch. The other day, like, so my bed, this is a really weird thing. My bed is really high in the air, like so high that if I fall off the bed, I'm for sure breaking my arm or my shoulder. Probably like a 90% chance of me breaking my shoulder. Like at least I'd say. Not as a non-doctor, I'm worried, but I like having my bed high up. Yes, that's weird. Okay. But I woke up and I, for some reason, was jamming like full speed. I was like half off the bed and I was jamming my elbow into the corner of my nightstand to the point where, like, if I hadn't woken up at that point, like there'd have been blood everywhere. Like absolutely everywhere. I don't know how long I had been there or how gradual that had been, but I'm not going to take a selfie at that moment and be like, look what I did. Woke up like this. Like the classic, oh, I just woke up like this. I would have woke up, my hair's all screwed up, I'm friggin' hanging off a thing, I got a big dent in my elbow. But if we were...
I mean, people should start taking selfies of themselves actually when they wake up. I feel like that should be a movement. Maybe you can start it, Matt. Start the actual
woke up like this, where it's like exactly, sometimes my one beard hair like goes straight up for some reason, like just crazy crap,
just dangling off your freaking buds.
But like,
that's so good.
But what I'm saying is a live stream would have captured that, and then if someone else had the same issue, I don't know how many people would have had the same problem, but like I'm kind of sure that someone else did out there.
I want people to chime in. Have you ever woken up half off the bed, jamming your elbow into your dresser or your nightstand?
Specifically on a bed that's too high and is an actual fall risk. Like the hospital beds can rise up and down depending on the model. Mine is like higher than that as a default.
Christ. Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, you know what I mean? You know, if I were to take a selfie that morning, it's like, damn, gotta go shower, get all ready, and then be like, all right, selfie. Right? You're only showing the very best the produced, but anyone who woke up that morning who was just laying in bed might be like, "Well, I look like an idiot," you know. And so that's sort of where the difficulty, or the work put forth, or the expertise gained, or the experience gained, isn't ever really shown. If you think about it, actually, everyone has their own unique path of experience. Even if it's something as simple as you did a high school job, or like you did a part-time job during high school or college or something. So for example, I'm extremely fast at cleaning. That's because I used to work in a factory cleaning massive industrial machines. That was a part-time job that I did during college, and that's it. I didn't have years and years and years of experience. I did it part-time, so I wasn't even full-time when I was doing it. But I'm still to this day fast at cleaning. I know what chemicals to use. I know what cleaner to use. I know how long to wait. I know how to mix the thing. I am extremely fast at it, and that's just the reality behind it. And that's because I have that little weird piece of expertise. So you can imagine if somebody worked in a photo gallery or something as even a high schooler, or they did it part-time, or they just did it for money for full-time for a bit, and they didn't have a massive amount of expertise, and then they go into the design field, even though the design is more than just photography, they still have a bit of like that visual angle, and they know what kind of looks good. And that's where that kind of comes in. And so you might be like, feel like an idiot and be like, man, that guy has been working here for a month and he knows more than me. And I've been here for 6 months, but it's like, yeah, but he also has 2 years working in a photo gallery. Whereas that's different. He can take the same sort of expertise that he's built up over the years. And we've touched on expertise like 3-4 times this episode. You can bring up the expertise, or he brings rather that expertise to the table. And that's so critical. You're one of our teachers, our programming teacher, he always said, like, if he doesn't need X thing, he just throws it out of his brain, right? And so we would ask him other questions about other tech, it was embedded. We would ask him other tech about other questions about other processors and other microcontrollers and those type of things we were working on. And he would just say, like, I don't know, like, I would have to look at it. Because his expertise teaches him how to look at it, it doesn't teach him how to do the thing. And it's not easy, which is critical for this sort of web news. It's not easy enough for him to just say, like, yeah, you just get the driver and you just make a Bluetooth driver for it. Come on. But in a YouTube video, that's the only part that would make it in there. It's the Bluetooth driver. And that is that is not pointing, I want to be clear, that is not saying that people who cut down videos shouldn't be doing that. You have to. Otherwise, you'd be watching somebody put something together for like 14 hours every day. It'd be freaking ridiculous, right? A produced piece of content is a produced piece of content for a reason. It is cut down. It is all nice and everything like that. That's fine. But it's just, you have to remember that there was a bunch of production time put into that thing. And that's how they got to the end result. There's hours behind those minutes in the video to get the result.
Exactly. I think one thing that I want to kind of impart on people is you're not alone in this. That's the biggest thing. Is like, if you're feeling like you're not learning fast enough, or you're having issues where other people maybe aren't having issues, you're not alone. Like, it's not like an uncommon thought that all of us have, regardless of how many years of experience we have. It's again that imposter syndrome talk. It's again whatever. Like, just keep pushing through it, and learn from your mistakes. Learn at your own pace as fast as you can learn. Everyone has their own pace. Again, like you mentioned, if you've been at a company for 6 months and a guy comes there and 1 month later he's ahead, in perceivably ahead of you, don't get caught up in the fact that he's better than you or something. No, he just learns differently, or he had a different background, or we're just different people. It's not a race. It's not a competition in that sense. Do your best. Like, don't slack off. Do what you can do, and you'll come out ahead as long as you're improving. That's what people are looking to see. Not everyone can be like a super genius or whatever. Like, not everyone can memorize everything with one look. Like, obviously those people have an advantage because they don't have to go through the process of looking up syntax every once in a while. But that's something that you can't compete with. There's no point in you sitting there and looking at a textbook and reading the syntax for PHP on how to map an array into another array, or a function that creates an array. There's no point of you learning that, reading it 15 times, writing it out 15 times, if you're only going to use it once or twice in your life, and you can look it up then. It's one of those things. Like, it's just, don't be scared that you don't know something. That should be something that moves you forward instead of scares you. That's the kind of way that I look at it. If I don't know something, that's something that I can easily not easily, but that's something that I can look up. That's if I sit down in an interview and someone asks me a question that I don't know, I'll tell them the steps I would take to learn that thing. That's what I would want to see in if I was interviewing someone else, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good capstone, honestly. That's a good capstone statement. And I think that covers the topic, honestly. I'm ready to conclude. I don't even have feedback. I think that's a good capstone. That's a good ending. And I'll let our new outro take us out, unless you have anything else to add there, Mike.
Nope.
But before we do that, I'm going to do the old Patreon, or thank the old patrons. So remember that we're also on that Patreon. If you want to support the show, that's patreon.com/HTML all the things. Check out the tiers, give that thing a go, and many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Sean from RabbitWorks JavaScript, find him at youtube.com/RabbitWorksJavaScript. Garrick from Local Path Computing and Web Design, find him at localpathcomputing.com. Ryan Gatchell from Blue Black Digital, find him at blueblackdigital.com. Chris from The Self-Made Web Designer, find him at selfmadewebdesigner.com. Tim from The Web Hacker, find him at thewebhacker.com. And DL Ford from dlford.io. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform you're listening to this on, and I'm going to let this outro sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.